Hi again, everybody, and welcome to a special emergency political podcast of Newsmakers TV. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Thursday, August 28th, and we are in the midst of a national brawl over redistricting, reapportionment, gerrymandering, redistricting, call it what you will. Anyway, we got a special election coming up on November 4th. There's something called Proposition 50 that's in the middle of it, and so we've had to summon the world's leading authority on both of these subjects back from his vacation at a tent in Lake Tahoe. Mark Z. Barabak, political columnist for the Los Angeles Times, who was actually the first person, I believe, to write about Gavin Newsom's efforts in this regard back on July 23rd. Anyway, Bud, welcome back from vacation. How you doing?
I'm going to put my dukes up because I feel a fight coming on.
No, no, no. It's just we can discuss how quickly we need to get on the plane to Portugal. I think that's the key difference here. Um, First of all, what is Proposition 50, and why are we having a special election in 2025?
Okay, I'm going to take off my commentator hat and put on my impartial political reporter hat, which I always keep handy. It's not that far removed. So Proposition 50 grows out of a effort in Texas to gerrymander the map in Republicans' favor. Republicans now in Texas hold, I believe, it's 25 of 38 congressional seats. We have a midterm election coming up next year. Historically, midterm elections are not good for the party in power. Republicans have a very tenuous hold on the House. Democrats just need to pick up 3 seats next year. History suggests there are no slam dunks in life or politics, as we know, but history suggests the average since World War II is the out party picking up something like a couple dozen seats. So it looks good for Democrats. President Trump, I have my I have my impartial hat on, so I will refer to him as our president, President Trump. No adjective, no criticism there. To boost the prospects of Republicans hanging on to the House, urged Republicans in Texas to redraw their lines. This is very unusual. It's not unprecedented in Texas. I'll come back to this in a second. It's unusual. Redistricting is typically done after each census. Political lines are drawn to adjust changes in population, done once every 10 or so years. It was done before in Texas when Tom DeLay, who some of your devoted followers will remember, they used to call him a hammer for his very aggressive political style, tore up the map in Texas mid-decade, redrew the lines. There was a Supreme Court case that came out of that said, yeah, that's fine. You guys want a partisan gerrymander? Go ahead. So Texas does this, and Gavin Newsom, our governor, who is, I don't know, is this commentary or is it just saying what's his plain as the
I think it
son?
becomes a category of actual fact.
Yes, is running for president in 2028. And as part of this campaign was in the South doing a tour. And he went on a left-wing podcast, the Tennessee Holler, where he said, well, if Texas is going to do it, then two can play this game. Fast forward to where we are now. There's some suggestion that Governor Newsom, I know this is going to shock all of you, was kind of blustering, didn't have the authority that he seemed to suggest, swaggering, well, two can play this game. Well, two can play the game, but it's not that straightforward. In Texas, it was just a matter of Republicans having the numbers. Democrats fled the state for a while to avoid a quorum. But the bottom line is Republicans had the numbers. They redrew the lines. Done. In California, voters took redistricting out of the hands of politicians, created an independent citizens commission that drew the lines to great effect. Historically,
That was in the before times of
that
20.
was in the before times, yeah. And historically, gerrymandering. I mean, it goes all the way back. The whole term gerrymander, what we call it gerrymander. The whole concept goes back literally the founding of the republic. Elbridge Gerry, if you prefer, was responsible for drawing these lines. He drew this funny line, looked like a salamander, became the gerrymander. Fast forward a couple hundred years, nothing new here. But California citizens, at the behest of Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, took it away. So fast forward again, Gavin Newsom says we're going to do this. He goes to the legislature in Sacramento. There was some discussion about whether they just do it and risk a lawsuit, but they decided the best and cleanest way to do it is to say go back to California voters, which they have to do. It is now written in the California Constitution that redistricting is done once a decade by this commission. So that brings us to Prop 50. What Prop 50 does is goes to California voters and says, hey, folks, we want to throw out these maps that the commission drew only until the next census. Throw those out. Democrats have redrawn a map that could wipe out and potentially lead to a Democratic gain of 5 to 6 seats. That is the background, and that's what voters are going to be voting on November 4th in this special election. Should we throw out the maps that were designed by the independent commission and replace them with a very conspicuous and admitted Democratic gerrymander?
So as I make my way through what I believe is my third or fourth mailer in the last 4 days from Charles Munger,
Yeah.
A multi-zillionaire who is leading the fight against this. Basically, November 4th special election, $100 million, maybe something like that. So that's unusual. Prop 50 is going to ask the question, can we suspend the independent commission lines for a period of time, specifically I mean, they're not making any bones about it, at least in the title and summary so far, to defend against what Texas has done, to try to ensure that Democrats have a fair fight in the midterms.
It's basically saying in so many words, Texas, and I'm going to come back to this in a few minutes. Texas, you stole 5 seats from us. We're going to steal 5 from you.
Yeah, and that's kind of what it's all about. So, I mean, two little footnotes I would add to that. One, Trump in early July, I mean, he always says the quiet part out loud, told Jim Abbott, the governor, find me 5 seats,
Yeah.
Try to find those 11,000 votes in Georgia.
And he even said we're entitled. He used the word, we're entitled to them. We're entitled to them. Yes, that was the words of our president.
And since this is a show of and for and by political hacks, we should also mention that our old friend Harmeet Dillon, who insiders in California will know as a Republican, state Republican hack, who is now leading the Civil Rights Division in the Department of Justice, sent the letter to Texas saying, "Hey, wait a minute, black people are getting too fair. The white people are getting screwed in these districts. You got
a fig leaf if they needed one." To say, oh, well, we have to do this reapportionment because we just happened to get this letter from the Justice Department saying that 4 of these things were improperly drawn, so we have to redo the whole map all over again. So again, I mean, there are fig leaves that are thicker than that particular one.
All right, so I'm going to do the worst thing anybody can ever do, which is go back and read a guy's column to himself. But no. On July, so on the first column you wrote about this, and you were quite prescient as usual to jump on it. You said it was a long shot that Gavin could do that. That's point one I want to ask you about. And then two, more than anything, this is a ploy to boost Newsom's White House ambition. So I want to take those two in order. First, have you been surprised at how easily he got it on the ballot, or that he got it on the ballot at all? I mean, there's reporting by Politico that they kind of said, it's like the dog that caught the car. They sort of got into this on accident.
Yeah, I mean, I am surprised. I mean, that column was written based on, I mean, look, I'm not an expert, although I play one in the newspaper. I mean, I talked to people who were experts, and they talked about all these hurdles. I mean, to take a step back, I think the column on that was, Gavin's blowing smoke or something, which he was. My point being this, well, you do that, I'm going to do this. It was like, well, no, you can't just do that. You have to go through all these hoops, and there are hoops, and there is some difficulty. And credit where due, he jumped the hoops, he ran the traps, he managed to do it. Little bit surprised that it came together because, again, talking to the best minds that I could come up with at the time, we're all very skeptical. They talked a lot about the obstacles that, there was some discussion early on about whether, as I said, they were going to just do it and invite a lawsuit. I think the polling and other minds prevailed and said, no, the way we really have to do this is to go to the voters and make our case to them to overturn their earlier handiwork. So yeah, somewhat surprised, but I think you make a good point. I think this is one of these things that kind of took on a life of its own. I mean, it started again as Gavin kind of huffing and puffing and puffing out his chest and promoting his presidential thing. That's what that was all about. The appearances I mentioned in Tennessee on this lefty podcast, and then it kind of took on a life of its own. Once it was out there, it was here we go.
Yeah, yeah. And then on August 20th, you caught up with it, and said it would still be a hard sell, which I agree, and I want to talk about the arguments to make. But again, I hammered on this on Gavin's White House ambitions, which I agree with. And as everyone who reads my stuff knows, I'm not a big Gavin Newsom fan. But two things can be true. One, he's doing it to boost his presidential ambition, but it's also the right thing to do. I mean, we go back to Gavin and gay marriage and conducting, gay weddings at San Francisco City Hall when he was the mayor in 2004, and that was a big look at me moment for him. But it was also the right thing to do. Uh, I guess my argument on it, and it's not my argument, it's everybody's argument, is this is not just any midterm election. It's like what we have seen Trump do in the first 7 months is basically, stomp all over the rule of law, let alone the separation of powers with the supine Congress and to a large extent Supreme Court. So the need or the wish for Democrats to hold the House, to grab the House, would be the last sort of gasp of power, which Trump is indicating he's going to exercise untrammeled. So isn't Gavin right about it?
Well, here's the okay, and
Issue?
here's where we disagree. I agree two things can be true. That Gavin can be run for president, can be running for president, that he can have done this basically to promote his presidential candidacy. I happen to think it's wrong. I happen to be opposed to Prop 50 and what they're trying to do. And my reasons are several. Starting with, I think President Trump is an abomination. I think he's terrible. I think what he's doing is horrible. I invite you to read any of my columns expressing that sentiment. Um, my concern is I do not think that this is wise tactically. I think it's a diversion. I think Democrats are fooling themselves on a couple things. And I have one thing is unprovable, but I go back to when Texas was first doing this idea that they're going to automatically grab 5 seats. They're probably going to grab 2 of those seats. At least 3 of the 5 are going to be somewhat competitive because Republicans are counting on a big Latino turnout and a favorable Latino turnout along the lines that they saw in 2024. The polling suggests that Trump's numbers aren't where they were in 2024. So Republicans are taking a risk. Let's say they get 2 seats, not those 5 they're talking about. If Gavin Newsom had done nothing, if Republicans had just done their gerrymander and they picked up those 2 seats, okay, not great, not good for government. But instead, we saw and we have seen an escalation. Gavin said, we're going to do this. So Texas said, well, Texas was going to do what they're going to do. Now you have Florida saying, oh, well, we're going to do it. And Missouri said, oh, well, maybe we'll do it. And Ohio's going to do it. And Indiana's talking about doing it. And you go from 2 seats to, maybe 14 seats or so. Now, maybe they would have done it anyway. Can't prove a negative. But in an alternative universe where none of this escalation, where given Trump and his attention span, we'd be talking about Cracker Barrel or something else today, maybe. So my feeling is that it's like Gavin kicked this hornet's nest. Was it necessary? I think he did it for political reasons. And maybe it would have been better off just doing nothing. I mean, look, I've said ad nauseum in columns, the best thing Gavin Newsom could do if he wants to run for president is do a great job as California governor. And we'll come back in a minute, I'm sure, to the memes and to this and, him being the fighter the Democrats want, all that stuff. I think the Democrats are kidding themselves if they think this is going to help them win back the White House. I mean, I know it feels good, and I understand the impetus and understand why it feels good to do that. If you take 5 seats, we're going to take 5 seats, and we'll show you. I think Democrats are kidding themselves. I think if they think that this is how they're going to win back the House, the party has much deeper problems than whether Republicans win 5 seats or not in Texas. And I think a lot of this is a distraction. I think that it's going to be seen by a lot of voters I'm talking not about partisans who love this. I'm talking about independent voters. I'm talking about people in Pennsylvania and Michigan, all those places. I think a lot of them just see this as, you know what, it's just a lot of politicians in the sandbox throwing sand at each other. What does this have to do with me and my life? So I think Democrats have a problem in terms of their messaging. I don't think this addresses it. And lastly, and forgive the whole good government sort of thing here, the whole goo-goo thing. I think there's something fundamentally wrong with, if you're disenfranchising millions of Democrats in Texas, I think it's wrong to disenfranchise millions of Republicans in California. I mean, if these lines come through in a state where Trump got 40-some% of the vote, where there are millions of Republicans who are going to have 4 seats in Congress, and the argument I made in my column is, this is very short-term and very tactical. But my feeling is what you do when you disenfranchise people like that who say, you know what, politics sucks. What's the point? I'm being screwed. They're all corrupt. They're all terrible. What does that do? That gives you Donald Trump. I think that explains how you get a Donald Trump. People becoming so disaffected and feeling disenfranchised and unrepresented that when a, quote, disruptor like Donald Trump comes along, it's very conducive. So to sum up my very long and long-winded argument, I think this could be, in the long term, detrimental to Democrats and their efforts to not just defeat Trump, but put MAGA-ism on the ash heap of history where it belongs.
Yeah. Well, as we like to say on Podcastville, a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
But no, I don't disagree with a lot of what you said. However, just on this question of the arms race over redistricting and, if you do this, we'll do that. I saw something with Amy Walter, queen of all House districts or something. It said, that the Republicans were going to remap stuff anyway. So once you get to the end of all of the, playing out the scenarios, they're either going to benefit themselves by between 5 and 12 seats, depending on whether Gavin did or didn't do something else. So, there is a tactical question. And you're right that most, wave midterm elections affect two dozen or more seats. So, maybe in the end, it'll just be stuff for us to talk about. The other point though is that I don't mean to sound like a catastrophizer, but this guy doesn't really believe in free and fair elections. I mean, apparently Vladimir Putin agrees with Trump that the 2020 election was stolen. So election lies is nothing new. I think if this happens, if the Republicans succeed in redistricting their way out of losing the House in 2020, that could be it for a number of cycles. Certainly, my lifetime cycle. And unifying government is not working out real well. The other thing that concerns me is just this sort of confluence event where you see, Trump sending National Guard troops, militarizing ICE to Democratic cities, trying to fix the terms of the midterm elections. And now he's, ranting about mail-in voting and someone, if you take the confluence of those events, it's going to be, even at the best case on election night in November of next year, no matter what happens, he and the Republicans are going to be screaming that it was stolen. There's going to be big fights about who's getting seated and how many guys won what seat and everything. It's just more and more chaos. And the guys that control the army tend to benefit from the chaos.
Look, I agree with you. That's kind of what you call the nightmare scenario. I mean, I like to believe, and maybe this is the idealistic Panglossian view of the world, but it's like my feelings. There's nothing that voters don't have the power to remedy.
We always get to this point here.
Well, we do. If they turn out in enough numbers, you know what I mean? I made the point. I had a back and forth with my fellow columnist, Anita Chabrier, who is like you, pro. And I made the point, look, if voters are that unhappy with Texas Republicans, what they've done, you know what? They have what could be a very competitive Senate seat. So you know what? Vote a Democrat in for the Senate. that'll show Republicans. If voters care enough, and there's going to be all sorts of obstacles that they put up to voting. But remember those inspirational pictures of people in South Africa waiting like 8 or 9 hours in these ridiculously long lines to vote. If people care enough, if they're concerned enough, if they're unhappy enough, flood the polls and vote in such overwhelming numbers that there is no question about who won. And yes, there's going to be lawsuits, and yes, but at the end of the day, I mean, you're right. If Trump refuses to recognize the results of the 2026 election and the Supreme Court upholds them, then yeah, maybe I'll be on that plane with you to Portugal. That's the worst case scenario. But I gotta hope until I see otherwise. I've got to hope that voters have it in their power, and if they're upset enough, they will turn out in sufficient numbers that Democrats will take back the House. Senate's a long shot. But if people are pissed off enough, then you will have a voice, you will vote, go out there and use it.
Yeah. All right. Well, just for the record, I'm one of those political independent goo-goos who strongly supported Proposition 20. The Independent Commission wrote about it at the time. But I'm going to hold my nose and vote for this thing because I don't see a lot of other things. All right, well, let's talk about Gavin in 2028 because,
Yep.
well, he's making his moves. There are other governors who are, and it's interesting, they're all Democratic governors who are, maneuvering as well. J.B. Pritzker in Illinois gave a very powerful speech, got a lot of pickup the other day, telling Trump, don't come with the National Guard to Illinois. And Illinois is ironically where the Texas Democrats fled when they were having this showdown about whether they're going to vote for it. Illinois can't really help much with the redistricting since they have the most gerrymandered state in the country, probably. But he's been interesting. And then Wes Moore in Maryland has had some back and forth with Trump about the National Guard, about crime in Baltimore, and so on and so forth. But he's had a slightly different tone. It's kind of, why don't you come to Baltimore and we'll walk around, take a look at it. And then you have Gretchen Whitmer up in Michigan, who's kind of trying to play ball with Trump as much as she can. I'm doing the best thing for my constituents. So you sort of have this range of ways people are approaching. Do you agree with me that Democrats, sort of rank and file Democrats are so desperate for somebody to punch back that Gavin's going to get a short-term benefit out of this?
Oh, no
But
question.
be a good long-term strategy for 28.
Yeah, well, I liken it to a sugar high. I mean, there's no question. I mean, look, it's very frustrating. It's this parade of horror every day, or I called it I did a column regarding Trump's takeover of the judiciary, the judicial system by appointing all these sycophants and horrible people to be, doing end run to install them as U.S. attorneys. I talk about this parade of terribles. So yeah, I can see why it feels great, to punch back and to do this and to do that. I do think it's a sugar high. I do think, Democrats are laughing. I mean, look, it's not my thing, all these memes and Newsom social media, and they're getting a lot of.
So just for people that are not terminally online, say a word about what it is he's doing.
Well, what he's doing is he's
social
mocking
media offices.
Yes, it's basically, taking on Trump on his own turf, these all caps tweets and, the merch and the memes and all this over the top self-reverence and self-referential memes and posts and all this and all that. And it's getting him a lot of following, a lot of yucks and a lot of laughs and a lot of this and a lot of that. My concern as someone who, now I'm putting my columnist hat back on, can say I think Trump's an abomination and very much want the MAGA movement to lose in 2028. I think Democrats could be deluding themselves if they think that that's what it's going to take to win the White House. I think in 2028, they'll be laughing all the way until J.D. Vance is elected president. They'll be like, oh my God, what's happened here? I mean, look, it's a sugar high and it feels good and it feels great. But what does it do to make housing more affordable? What does it do to make groceries more affordable? What does it do to make people feel better about the economy and life in general? I mean, again, it's a sugar high and it's getting Gavin a lot of attention. But look, it's August of 2025. We are just light years away from 2028. And I think, once the sugar high wears off, whether that's a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, people will say, okay, great. But, and in particular, I mean, like I said, the Democratic base, which has a huge say in deciding the party's nominee, is not going to get him elected president. So how do you appeal beyond that base? How do you appeal to people who aren't online? You said let's explain it to the people who aren't online. Well, a lot of these people who aren't online do vote, and they don't vote on memes. They don't vote on tweets. They don't vote on all this social media stuff. So what's your message to them?
Yeah. And I agree with you about what they need to do about 28, but in 26 in the midterms are typically more of a referendum on the president. And so the Democrats' message is going to be, Trump's bad, as you put it in one of your columns. Trump
Yeah,
is. And
although
isn't that going to be exactly the message that they're going to do for this campaign, for the Prop 50 campaign?
well,
They
yes.
can't argue the merits on this.
No, it's very simple. It'll be Trump bad. It'll be California fights back. That's their message. But I would point out in 2018 when Democrats had a very very good year and picked up 40 some seats, including 7 in California. The message went beyond Trump's bad. I mean, a lot of if you will, to use the economic term, a lot of the Trump's bad is already priced in, right? A lot of people think Trump's bad, know Trump's bad. Why did Democrats win back the House? Because they made a huge issue out of health care and Republicans trying to take away your health care. So, Trump's bad. Yes, you're right. Trump's bad is going to help spur the Democratic base and get them to turn out. But Democrats are going to need to win over a certain number of voters who are independents, who aren't as frequent voters. And the messaging to them is going to be about, the economy, even if it's not direct. I mean, it's an interesting thing talking about Amy Walter, who, we both are big fans of. She had a very interesting column that talked about sort of in presidential election years, sort of the state of the economy, right track, wrong track is a big gauge of how a party does. In the midterms, it's the president's popularity, which right now, the last poll I saw, Trump was at 37%. That's not great. But what is it that's making the president unpopular? I would argue that there's all this, let's just call it the crazy, but I think a large part of it is the economy. People aren't feeling good about Trump right now. They don't like the crazy, but people, if you get beyond the Democratic base, a lot of people aren't happy because the economy is not great. Because right, Trump's going to make inflation go away and everything was going to be great. Well, it hasn't gone away, and things aren't great, and they don't have a lot of faith in the economy.
Yeah. Well, I was in the grocery store yesterday, and ground beef was $6.02, which and I went online, and actually ground meat prices are at record highs. So I mean, people, we heard all about eggs. I don't know why Democrats aren't talking about ground beef some more.
Well, and wait for the tariffs to hit. That lovely Hawaiian shirt of yours is going to cost between 10 and 50% more.
Ballpark special, pal.
There you go.
You got a one sentence take on Pritzker or Whitmer or Westmore or any of them?
Oh, governors tend to do better. It's been a while. Interesting, it's been a while since we've had a governor, but Democrat governors tend to do better, particularly at a time when people aren't terribly fond of Washington. I think Democrats have a strong bench. You didn't mention Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky. He's sort of intriguing to me. Here's a red state governor who at one point was the most popular governor in America in a red state. So yeah, I think the Democrats have a very strong and interesting field or bench, if you will, of governors around the country.
Yeah.
That was a long one sentence.
Do you how do you think this thing about the military in Washington is playing for Trump? I haven't seen a lot of polling on it outside of Washington. I mean, the crime thing is another tricky issue. It's like immigration for Democrats. They just they're trying to say three things at one time.
Right.
I mean, do you see that as a political winner for him?
Well, you're right. I mean, crime is it's a tricky thing for Democrats because they don't want to be out there saying. I mean, you can argue all day long. Well, crime rates are down, blah blah blah. But if people aren't feeling it, so it is a tough issue for Democrats to argue that crime is not a problem. By the same token, I hate to say it, but we're just one Kent state away from something really ugly. All you need is some National Guardsman to go off half cocked and shoot grandma while she's crossing the street. I mean, I don't see that ending well. I don't see it ending well.
Yeah, yeah. All right. All right, pal. What else you working on?
Well, I got some stuff coming up on the governor's race. I haven't read about that. We haven't talked about the
Oh, the
governor's race.
governor's race. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. It's
Wide
getting
open
kind of,
governor's race. Yeah, it's interesting. Kamala decided not to run, as everyone by now knows. This seems to me like the most wide open race we've had since '98, when of all people, Gray Davis won. There's six candidates, but I liken political reporters to like children, in front of a toy store window. It's like, you have all these toys at home, but it's like, oh, I want that bright shiny thing. So the new bright shiny things is Alex Padilla. It's like, oh, maybe he'll get into the race, right? And then Alex Padilla will get in, or he
Senator
won't.
Padilla, who was appointed by
Gavin Newsom
to fill Dianne
to be
Feinstein.
senator, correct, and was just reelected. And maybe he'll get in, maybe he won't, but he's the bright shiny object of the moment. It's like we have six candidates, but we want more. So is Rick Caruso going to run? That's another bright shiny toy, and it's a very, very wide open race. Polls show Katie Porter is the front runner, quote unquote. And I use those scare quotes not to disparage her, but I'm sorry, when you're getting between 17 and 20%, that is not exactly, world beating front runner numbers. Bottom line is it's a wide, wide open race.
Yeah, but they got to, if you're going to run, you got to decide pretty quick. No.
Yeah. I think between now and the end of the year, I think the field will probably be set between now and the end of the year. And that's going to be interesting. I have a habit of every gubernatorial cycle. I like to get in my car and drive around California, talk to real folks, just to kind of get their sense, because we who talk to each other sort of just make a lot of broad assumptions about what people are doing and thinking and saying. So I like doing what we in the business call talkers. And the thing that really struck me when I did this, and these are open-ended. I just drive around, I stop, I find random people, and I ask what's on their mind, and I don't say to them, gee, don't you think this or don't you think that? And I was struck by how critical people at that time were about Gavin Newsom and him running for president. And something I heard over and over again, unbidden, mind you, was this notion: we want someone to focus on California. We want someone to do the basics, take care of homelessness, take care of housing costs, fill potholes, make traffic better. It was a real back to basics. And there was even, surprisingly at that time, granted, things weren't as crazy as they were, but there was a real sense, a real division that was surprising to me, even among Democrats, about how hard do you fight Trump and focus on fighting Trump versus, again, the nuts and bolts, roads, crime, homelessness. I get a sense that after Gavin, there's a real desire for, again, someone who's going to really focus on the nuts, the bolts, not running for president, not getting in fights every day or tweeting at Trump, but just doing the job of governor.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think Padilla could be formidable in that way. He's always, I don't know, he sort of struck me as a fish out of water in Washington. He seems like more of a Sacramento guy than a Washington guy. And he is very kind of down to earth and pragmatic. I don't see the Katie Porter thing, frankly. She's just more of a show horse than a workhorse. And I think that you're correct that people are looking for more of a workhorse. I think Javier Becerra, the candidate of healthcare, I'm not sure that's going to be the right timing, but he's another guy who is very kind of policy focused and drills down on stuff. I could see that as well, but it's interesting. It's like I can't get excited about it. You're right, it is a wide open race, but it's just I don't know. Maybe it's just early. Maybe I'll get around.
It is really, and you've heard me say, your billions of viewers have heard me say, I make no predictions. I don't know. I don't have any idea. Someone will emerge. Gray Davis was the bland and the boring, and we need to go back pre-recall and all that. He was kind of the bland and the boring and the slow and the steady, but people were ready for that at the time.
Right. Right. Although before that we had Peyton Wilson, who was the bland and the boring.
Although, in retrospect,
well, Pete was playing. He was toying around with running for president too. So
and that folly, but it was interesting. I don't want to get old, do this old guy waxing nostalgic thing, but you did have an era where you had Willie Brown in the assembly and Pete Wilson, two guys who basically got stuff done. You know what I mean? Who were serious.
There was two parties that cared about making the government work. They had very different ideas about how that how to go about doing that, but I think you only have one party that's interested in making the government work now.
Yes, yes, that is the big difference. Yeah, that is a big
All right.
difference.
Before we go, let me ask you two sort of insider questions. One is, I remember doing those stories where you run around and talk to people and stuff, and I'm just curious. You've been doing that for what, 70, 80 years now. It used to be you say, "Oh, hi, I'm Jerry. I'm from the Chronicle. I'm here to help. Talk to me." People would be very interested in talking to you and open and stuff. Given the sort of decline of people's view of the media, quote unquote, whatever that is, do you find any difference now in how people react to you when you identify yourself as
Yeah,
being from
yeah.
the press and here to help?
Yeah, it's funny you ask that because yeah, you get a lot of fake news, oh the LA Times fake news, or I don't talk to the fake news. But I was pleasantly surprised. I just did a talker what earlier this month or end of last month, is before I went on vacation in the Central Valley, where I went to these teeny tiny little towns in the Central Valley. I talked about the Jeff Epstein thing. And I was surprised how many people were amenable to talking. And yes, yes. Bottom line is yes, it's gotten harder. I mean, it's always kind of. It's funny. I love doing them. I hate doing them because it's fascinating what you can learn talking to people. But I always feel like this creepy weirdo. Hey, sometimes I walk up and say, "Hey, I'm not a creepy weirdo. I'm something worse. I'm a reporter," and that kind of breaks the ice. But yes, it has somewhat gotten harder as people have become more adversarial, and there's the perception of the media being on team D or anti-Republican or anti-Trump, whatever. It has become somewhat harder, but I'm still pleasantly surprised that a lot of people are still willing to take the time to talk. And I find that once they get going, I mean, the conversations are fascinating, which is why, again, I hate doing it because I just hate walking up to random people like some weirdo. But it's fascinating what you can learn when you talk to folks.
Yeah. And I always said that when I taught interviewing. It's like people love to be asked what they think, and people love to talk about themselves. So I mean, if you can get past that first hurdle, you're
Yeah.
there. And then the other thing, we talked a little bit about how Democrats are sort of desperate for somebody to punch back. And I got to say, I have been underwhelmed by the performance of Hakeem Jeffries, the majority leader in the House now, and kind of who was more or less handpicked by Nancy Pelosi as his successor. Is she still active? I mean, what do you hear behind the scenes? I mean, is she still got a voice and a hand in that? I mean, sure, people sure miss her.
Yeah, I think she does. I mean, I think she was really important in terms of getting people behind the Newsom Prop 50, which it wasn't at the time, but the whole thing.
I
Yes,
mean,
short answer.
House members, Democratic House members specifically.
Well, it wasn't that long ago. It was just about a year ago when she helped show Joe Biden the door, right? So I think she's still very much, it's very funny. I've heard more than once a lot of people who are like, we need new blood. There's all this gerontocracy in Congress, blah, blah, blah. But Nancy Pelosi is the exception. I mean, there's still an incredible amount of regard and respect for Nancy Pelosi. And yes, I think she's still very influential behind the scenes.
So this billionaire tech bro Bernie Krat guy who's trying to run against her or something up in San Francisco, that's going nowhere.
I'd be surprised. I've done iterations of that
Our friend
countless
Art
times.
Agno says,
I've
yeah, he's
gone
a
out and
big
I've talked.
pro.
Yeah, I've gone out. Maybe it was 2 or 3 election cycles ago. People saying, "Yeah, we love Nancy Pelosi, but it's time for fresh blood," and then she wins with 60, 70%. I've talked to her opponents who've run against her from the right, from the left. I think Nancy Pelosi will have that seat until Nancy Pelosi decides she doesn't want that seat anymore.
All right, and then finally, I got a major news tip for you.
Yeah.
Believe me, if you get to the bottom of this one, you'll have something. There's a big auction house in LA that was about to do the auction of the estate of Dianne Feinstein,
Yeah.
state senator, and the day before it went live, it was canceled, and mysterious. Can't find out now why, but I'm sure if you find the answer to that one, you'll have the golden key, as Diane used to say about what.
Wow. Huh. I was
Yeah.
aware of the sale, wasn't aware it was canceled. I was planning on bidding on I don't know. I wonder if she took contemporaneous notes. I'm sure you and I are under there with big X's through our faces. And I mean, you and I both covered Diane long enough to be in the doghouse, out of the doghouse.
Well, I'll say that I went through the whole catalog just because I'm, don't have a life, but a lot of jewelry in there. But for some reason there was a saxophone listed for $250. So I was going to bid on the saxophone,
Oh,
but
that's too
I
funny.
didn't, I didn't have the, I didn't
You
have
know,
the.
I will say, just to bring it back to my vacation and my 2 weeks in a tent in Tahoe, there is now a sign, which is new. I go up there every year, so I notice changes. There's now a sign along the west shore of Lake Tahoe, Diane Feinstein bike path or whatever. There she is, commemorated with the new signs up in
Well,
Tahoe.
Diane was one of those senators who really was into the weeds on all this stuff.
Oh
And
yeah,
Tahoe was always an issue of hers and the environmental safety or security of Tahoe.
yeah. Her and Harry
At
Reid
the
did a lot.
time she was a mayor, yeah, of Turpa. She was always on about Turpa, so I'm not surprised that that's the case. And then just a final word just about Diane's jewelry. You and I used to work for and with a guy called Dan Rosenheim, who was our boss at the Chronicle for a while. He started as the economics editor, and while he was the economics editor, he went on. Remember, Diane used to take all these Far East jaunts because she
Yes,
was Miss Pacific Rim.
yes,
I think he was in the Philippines with her or something. Anyways, she came down for dinner one night. And she had on this necklace, this fabulous with all these stones on, and and Rosenheim remembers he complimented her on it, and she said, "Dan, I'm a big woman and I have big rocks."
that's great. That's great. That's classic Diane. That's classic Diane. I love that. That's a great story. Maybe we should reach out to Dan. Maybe Dan will bid on it.
All right, man. Thanks. Mark Z. Barabak. Read his column in the Los Angeles Times. Hit like, hit subscribe to us on YouTube. Subscribe to us on Substack, SB Newsmakers, and we will see you next time on the show. Thanks.